Hey, greetings everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Senior Fellow at the Media Research Center. I just want to say I pray that each and every one of you had a wonderful and blessed Merry Christmas and wishing you a Happy New Year. And the interesting thing about this New Year is that we're not just coming to the end of a year, we're coming to the end of a decade. And it's been a pretty interesting decade when you think about it. I was just recently reading about how the Islamic jihadist attacks in the past decade in Europe have been just monumental, and people are predicting that they're not going to be toned down. But when I think about this past decade and where we are heading in the United States of America, I think about four quotes. And there are four quotes that deal with that incredible topic of socialism. See, at the beginning of this decade, one of the most prosperous countries in the Western Hemisphere, Venezuela was facing the incursion of socialism under a dictator by the name of Hugo Chavez. As a matter of fact, it was about 2011 when Hugo Chavez decided to ban private gun ownership. And we have seen what has happened in this year because of those citizens in Venezuela can no longer defend themselves.
I think it has been surprising to a lot of people in Washington, in the administration at least, but this is taking longer than they thought, despite the sanctions, despite the pressure. With the help of Russia and other outside forces, Maduro is hanging on.
And not only hanging on, but he appears to still control the military. You have to understand, in Venezuela, gun ownership is not something that is open to everybody. So if the military have the guns, they have the power. And as long as Nicolas Maduro controls the military, he controls the country.
And the whole thing about this socialist move in Venezuela, it was something that was welcomed by many Americans. Remember Oliver Stone, Sean Penn, Henry Belafonte.
I had to tell you, not hundreds, not thousands, but millions of the American people, millions, support your revolution, support your ideas, and we are expressing our solidarity with you.
And many others, to include Bernie Sanders, a presidential candidate, were just lauding and praising and sending accolades to heap upon Hugo Chavez. But as we close out this decade, think about what we have seen happen in Venezuela. Think about what we have seen in this year, the final year of this decade, happening in that country that used to be, well, it still is the Saudi Arabia of the Western Hemisphere. More oil reserves, but yet we have people that are starving, people that are eating their own pets, zoo animals, going to the sewers for drinking water, and dying because of a lack of medical supplies. But yet, in February of 2009, we had a Newsweek article that said, here in the United States of America, we're all socialists now. And think about it. In this past decade, somehow it became a trendy thing to go out and say that, yep, I believe in socialism. As a matter of fact, a lot of our young people on college campuses do.
But it seems some students can't even define what socialism is.
How would you define socialism?
I mean, honestly, that definition gets thrown around a lot.
How would you view what socialism is, though?
To be quite honest, I don't know.
It could really benefit our country in the future.
I think it's a good idea.
Trying to spread the wealth is definitely a good thing in America, and it's definitely a thing that's needed.
I feel like everyone should have free education and health care.
How are we going to pay for those?
Oh, God. I mean...
Us,
I guess.
Yeah. Who, in your mind, should pay for all of the free things?
All of the free things? Well, some of it should come from taxes, but the government should pay for it.
They fail to understand the failure of socialism. They don't recognize the failures of wealth redistribution, nationalizing economic production, creating and expanding a welfare state, a dependency society, and of course the whole social egalitarianism. We're all equal, but I don't think we are. So as we go into this new decade, there are four quotes that I think we all should remember when it comes to dealing with the issue of socialism. And perhaps the people there in Venezuela, well, maybe someone should have reminded them of these four quotes at the beginning of this past decade. The first one comes from Vladimir Lenin, who once said, the goal of socialism is communism. What we fail to understand is that socialism is an economic model. But the real goal of this economic model is a societal change. And that change leads us to, like I said, the social egalitarian model that says that we're all equal, that there are no people that can achieve and success is demonized. Exact same thing that we saw happen in Venezuela, where Hugo Chavez went after the quote unquote 1%ers and those successful, productive members of his society. And look at what that society has become today. All you have to do is go to a place down in South Florida called Western Florida and see all those Venezuelan expatriates that are there, that were run out of their own country. But if the goal of socialism is communism, then why do we think that our young people or anyone here in the United States of America would want to accept it? Why do we see young people in China and Hong Kong taken to the streets to protest against the very same thing that some of our young people want to embrace? The next quote comes from Margaret Thatcher, who said that the inherent problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money.
And socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. It's quite a characteristic of them.
And that's so very true. You can only tax people so much, but then there's nothing else there. And to think that here in the United States of America, we hear about 70% personal income tax rate, or maybe even higher. You can't tax your way into prosperity. And I love it when the progressive socialists of the left try to say that those Scandinavian countries, that they're socialist. No, they believe in a free market economy. They have a capitalist system. Yes, they do provide great benefits to their population, but their taxation, well, if you want to talk about equality, their taxation is equally distributed against all people. It's not targeted against a certain amount of people. And therefore, it won't work here in the United States of America. Matter of fact, we got more people in the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area than some of those Scandinavian countries do in their entire populations. The third quote comes from Sir Winston Churchill, where he talks about socialism is a philosophy of failure. It's a creed of ignorance, and it's a gospel of envy. And that socialism only serves one purpose. It's the equal sharing of misery. And that's what we've seen throughout history. And in the past decade, that's what we have seen happen in Venezuela. So why is it that we want to have the exact same failure, that exact same creed of ignorance, that exact same gospel of envy, the hatred, the demonization of success happen here in the United States of America? And the last quote comes from Ronald Reagan, who says that here's how you tell the difference with a communist or a socialist. See, a communist or socialist is a person that has read Lenin and Marx. But an anti-communist or anti-socialist is a person that understands Lenin and Marx. We can read the Communist Manifesto all that we want, but we must understand the truths behind it. We cannot be ignorant to the fact that we are facing a philosophy of governance that has never been successful anywhere in the world. And to hear people say that their socialism that they can implement in the United States of America will be better than any other socialism that has been tried elsewhere in the world, that's a false narrative, and that's a lie. We're heading into a new decade, America. 2020 is around the corner. And what I love about going into the year 2020, into a new decade, 2020 connotates clear vision. Let's clearly see the challenges that we have with the philosophy of governance that promotes wealth redistribution, nationalizing economic production, creating and expanding a welfare nanny state, and social egalitarianism. And always remember that this thing called socialism, this tyranny, this scourge, well, it can only be implemented by fear, intimidation, coercion, threat, and eventually violence. Which is why all socialist dictators start out by disarming the populace, because only people that are armed can be citizens. People that have been disarmed will be subjects. And that was a lesson that we learned oh so many decades ago on April the 19th of 1775 in these great United States of America. Happy New Year to each and every one of you. And let's go into this new decade, recommitting ourselves to liberty and freedom and the American way of life.